When somebody hurts you or something bad happens, do you become bitter or angry? Today, let's talk about that because our bitterness and anger can only hurt us. So let's see what happens with that when we add God into the equation. Join us today. Good morning. Welcome to our Encouraging Truth series where we are very happy that you are joining us today. Today we have Encouraging Truth number 81. But before I tell you what that is, I'll just say that last week we talked about a book that we had written called The Equation. It's all about the life of Joseph in the Old Testament. And last week we learned something really, really valuable, and it was this, that adding God into the equations in life changes everything. We learned that last week. So today, I want to move on and talk a little bit more about Joseph and his brothers. And here is our Encouraging Truth number 81. It's always a choice to be bitter and hate. It's always a choice. And we need to remember that when someone hurts us, we can choose to be bitter towards them or hateful towards them, or we can choose to add God into the equation and have peace that can override any portion of our bitterness and hatred towards the person who hurt us. We learned this from our math equation last week. 1 + 1 = 2, or 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. This is how it plays out. 1 + 1 is me plus my problem, and that's always going to equal anger and bitterness and frustration, hurt, pain, unforgiveness, those kind of things. But if we change the equation to 1 + 1 + 1 = 3, we add God as that third one, and it looks like this: me plus the problem of my anger and bitterness plus God is going to equal peace or tranquility or harmony or reconciliation. See, somehow when we give our problem a different equation, it changes our life. We're going to learn that as we pick up our story today from Joseph. Last week we learned that Joseph's 10 older brothers hated him. He was the youngest of 11 brothers at the time. He was the only son at this point of Rachel and of Jacob and Rachel. So the birth of Joseph was just this miraculous event to them. And the other brothers could tell. Joseph was the cause of a lot of jealousy from his stepbrothers because Jacob made it clear that Joseph was his favorite son. Of course, we know he made this coat of many colors for him. But Jacob did what parents should never do, and that is have favorites and then let your other kids know about it. So when Joseph is a teenager, he has two dreams. And these two dreams allude to the fact that his family and his 10 stepbrothers, older stepbrothers, would bow down to him. Now, in retrospect, Joseph probably should have kept that to himself, but instead, he blurts out his dreams to his brother and his father. And it made his brothers furious and jealous. And those two things mixed together produced a chain of events that would change all of their lives. The sad part about the story is how hatred and bitterness towards another person can destroy a life, can destroy our life. I told you last week that we wrote this book, The Equation, because someone in our life had hurt somebody else in our life, and it was so shocking to us. But for me, I had a clear choice. And the choice was to let that person destroy my life by keeping the equation me plus that person that I hate, or add God into the equation and give this person over to God and say, God, it's me plus my problem of hatred plus you, and you're going to have to deal with that person and change me on the inside. Because I knew that if I was going to continue down this really bad path, if I refused to add God into the equation, honestly, it would have destroyed me. And thankfully, this story of Joseph helped me see what hatred did to his brothers. And I didn't want to become like them. So here's the problem. The problem is that we live in this world that says, we have rights. You should treat me good. See, Joseph's brothers had the same problem. They felt that they had the right to be treated just like Joseph was. They had the right for their dad to love them equally. They had the right to be jerks to their baby brother if they wanted to, okay? Everyone just has rights. They feel like they have their own rights. But for us, we say things like, well, I don't have to take that from you. I have rights. I should be able to get back at you for hurting me. I have that right. I can treat her or him anyway. I have that right because of what they did to me. Nobody's going to get away with that. They did that to me. I have rights. See how that works? So because of that, we let people get to us. And the problem is we become hateful towards them and bitter towards them. But what we see from our story today is that, guess what? With that kind of attitude, we're going to lose. We're going to just lose in life. And we see this with the story of Joseph and his brothers. So Joseph has his dream, of course. Now the brothers are totally annoyed, and this is the beginning of the craziness. Genesis 37, verse 12. Then his brothers went to pasture their father's flock in Shechem. Jacob said to Joseph, so the dad says to Joseph, are not your brothers pasturing the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send you to them. And he said, I'll go. Then he said, go now and see about the welfare of your brothers and the welfare of the flock, and bring word back to me. Now, in a way, we can kind of see how frustrated Joseph's brothers were, because it seems like maybe they felt Joseph was like the family snitch. Like Jacob, the dad, is like, hey, go tell me what the brothers are doing and if they're actually doing their job. And so they're frustrated. Maybe they're frustrated with that. Maybe they're frustrated because they have to go out and work the fields, and Joseph gets to wear a coat and didn't have to work at all. Who knows? But whatever was going on, the brothers were sick of it, and they let it eat them alive. But as annoyed as they were on this particular day, it was different. They were done with Joseph. They wanted him out of their life, and it didn't even matter how. So they hatched a plan. Genesis 37:18, when they saw him from a distance and before he came close to them, they plotted against him to put him to death. They said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Now then, come and let us kill him and throw him into one of these pits, and we'll say, a wild beast devoured him. Then let us see what will become of his dreams. But Reuben heard this and rescued him out of their hands and said, let us not take his life. Reuben further said to them, shed no blood. Throw him into this pit that is in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hands to restore him to his father. Reuben was the oldest, probably the wisest at this point. He knew he didn't want murder on his conscience, and he also knew how much his father loved Joseph, and he knew that his father's heart would break if his favorite son died. Reuben wanted no part of this, so he leaves for a while. We don't really know where he goes, but long enough for his brothers to come up with another plan. Verse 23 says, so it came about when Joseph reached his brothers, and they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the vari-colored tunic that was on him, and they took him and threw him into the pit. Now the pit was empty without any water in it. Then they sat down to eat a meal. And as they raised their eyes and looked, behold, a caravan of Ishmaelites was coming from Gilead with their camels bearing aromatic gum and balm and myrrh, on their way to bring them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it for us to kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he's our brother, our own flesh. His brothers listened to him. Then some Midianite traders passed by, so they pulled him up and lifted Joseph out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. Thus they brought Joseph into Egypt. Isn't that like completely shocking that these boys came up with this horrible plan and did this to their own brother, all because they were filled with hatred and bitterness and jealousy? The problem is this: if we don't deal with our own bitterness and hatred, it will ultimately destroy us. If we don't deal with it, it's going to destroy us, not that person. It's like the wife who was dumped by her husband for a younger woman. It's like the boss letting you go from a job you poured your entire life into for the last 40 years, and they hired someone less qualified than you. It's like your best friend got into the college that you've always wanted to get into, and yet you know that she cheated to get in. It's those things that make us bitter and angry and jealous. And what happens is we trap ourselves in this box of anger and bitterness. I want you to think of a box. Think of a box and think of the tools that it takes to build a box. It takes a hammer and nails and wood and all those things. But once the box is there, it can entrap us. Here are some tools that entrap us. We have the hammer of negativity, the nails of anger, the wood of gossip, the glue of hate. And Joseph's brothers built that kind of a box for themselves and lived in it on a daily basis. So, if that's us, if we live in that kind of a box, angry and bitter and so angry at someone for something they did to us, we need to tear that box down. Here's how we do it. Tool number 1, the Bible. We have to open up the Bible and see what it is that's keeping us in this box. Look at what Ephesians 4:31 says. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you. He's saying don't live those kind of lifestyles. But in order to do that, we have to do something. We have to name it, claim it, and then ask God to tame it. Okay, I don't know who wrote that, but I thought that was great. In other words, we have to say, God, I am so angry. I am so mad at that person for what they did. God, I'm claiming that as my own. I know that that's bitterness in my heart. I know that that's anger or clamor, all the evil things you tell me not to do. I know it is eating my heart away. God, would you do something about it? The first step is Psalm 32. Then I acknowledged my sin to you and did not cover up my iniquity. And I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. The first thing we do is acknowledge it and confess it. We say, God, I don't like this. I feel so angry at that person. But God, I need you desperately to take this away from me. The second tool is this. You need to think new thoughts. Think new thoughts. Philippians 4:8 says this, and now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what's true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Fix your mind on good things. Stop these crazy thoughts before it gets into the, I think I'm going to sell the person I hate into slavery stage. When you have a bad thought, you capture it. You capture it and you say, God, this thought keeps coming back. I'm giving it to you. And if you have to give it over to God 50 times a day, then that's what you do. And you consistently say, God, I have this thought. I don't want it. Please take it from me. God, I have this thought. Please take it from me. God, I don't want to be like this. God, I want to think happy thoughts and good thoughts and pure thoughts. And we're constantly going to Him with it. The third thing, and I will tell you, this is my hardest thing. Pray for that person. Matthew 5:44 says, but I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. Now, I'm telling you what, this was the hardest part for me, because here was my prayer. God, you need to destroy that person. God, you need to take everything away from her for what she did. God, you need to make her life miserable. That was my prayer, okay? Not the greatest prayer, but it was a start for me. And then eventually, as I started being honest with God about my feelings, I was able to say, God, I think she's a mess. Would you help her? There's something wrong with her to make her do what she did. God, something's not right. So would you help her with that? That took a lot of time to get to that, just so you know that. The fourth thing is this. Find something positive about that person and think on that. This was another problem for me. But you go, you know what? There's just nothing positive about my ex-husband. There's nothing positive about my boss or my best friend. But here is one. God created that person and has a purpose for their life just like He has one for you. See? That's what we can think of. God, I don't know. I don't like her right now, but you created her. And you have a purpose for her. So God, I'm going to pray for her because of that. The second tool that we can use is this. People. Surround yourself with uplifting people. You need to be around people who will help you through this. You need to be around people who point you to looking up, to praying for people. Because you know what? There's a lot of people out there that want to gossip. They want to feed into your bitter feelings. They want to go, I know how you feel, and that person shouldn't have done that, and that's a horrible person, and feed, and I'm so sorry for you, and I'm so sad for you. Don't do that. Do not be around people like that. Because I think Joseph's brothers negatively fed off of each other. One brother you can imagine says, can you believe Joseph did that? Can you believe Dad gave him that? Can you believe Dad is so unfair? I can't believe it, I can't believe it. And then this just goes on and on and on until they're all just in this hateful frenzy. See, hatred and bitterness grows as people feed off of ugliness. Max LUCADO says this. He says, 2 types of voices command your attention today. Negative ones fill your mind with doubt, bitterness, and fear. Positive ones purvey hope and strength. Which one will you choose to heed? Because unfortunately for Joseph's brothers, they didn't do any of these tools. They let their anger and their bitterness and their jealousy get the best of them. So they were going to do something about it. And in a moment of frustration, they sold their little brother to slave traders on their way to Egypt. And they figured that just getting rid of Joseph would get rid of their problems. But here's what we learn from this scene. Many times we walk away from difficult circumstances or challenging people, and we do it like the brothers out of a selfish motive. I don't want to be bothered by them anymore. They annoy me. My life would be so much better without them. And many times when we walk away from them because of our wrong motives, what happens is we are the ones that suffer that for the rest of our lives. We're the ones who suffer from that guilt. We see this all the time in marriages, like the husband finds someone else and leaves the wife because he thinks like there's someone better out there for him. But that man, I can assure you, has nagging guilt most of his life. He looks at the kids and he looks at what a mess they are, and he's like, I did that when I left my wife. You're constantly in contact with your ex at graduation or weddings or soccer games or whatever. And you're always reminded of what you did. What we learn from the story is this: getting rid of their annoying brother Joseph never made their lives better. Instead of working through their issues with Joseph, these men had to live with the guilt and shame of what they did all of their lives. And that should be a really good lesson for us. These brothers made a rash, emotional decision that devastated their lives and the life of their father and the life of their brother. When Cheyenne was younger, she had a problem with someone and she called us crying, and she was like, I'm just going to go over there and tell that person how I feel. And Rob said, Cheyenne, don't do that. Don't make emotional decisions and then pop off and say something that you might regret the next day. Come home, get a good night's sleep, see how you feel about it tomorrow. It's a great lesson. Don't do things on emotion. Think of what would have happened to Joseph's family if these brothers would have stepped up and said, you know what? Wait a minute, let's just wait another day. Let's just wait another day and see how we feel about this before we sell him to some traders on their way to Egypt. But they didn't. No one stood up. The boys sold Joseph, deceived their father, told him that he was eaten by a wild animal. And they knew once Daddy's grief was over with, the boys could get on with their life and be rid of their one problem, Joseph. Here's what we learn from this today. We have to think past today. We have to think past today to see what our rash decisions are going to do for the future. Think past the hurtful words you're about ready to say on that phone call to that person that you know you'll never be able to take back. Think past your desire to walk out on your marriage, because I want you to look fast forward to the future to see what that's going to look like. Think past the letter that you want to write or the email that you want to write at this moment because you're so filled with angry emotions. Instead, pick up your Bible. Pick up your Bible, focus on God, figure out what He tells you to do, because He knows the best thing for you to do. And then when you can't seem to get over that problem and that person, you need to step aside and say, God, you deal with them. God, you deal with that person. You deal with my ex. You deal with that boss. You deal with that friend who cheated. God, you deal with them, because God is better at dealing with people than we are. God, if they need to be disciplined, you do it. I don't want to be a part of that. That's what God asks of us to do. So here is our encouraging truth, number 81. It's always a choice to be bitter and hate. So let's make the right choice, because how we respond today will actually affect our future. Hope that helped. Have a really good day.